When you hear that someone's a Hall of Famer, most people assume it's because of their performance on the athletic fields. But today's guest, not only is he a two-time Hall of Famer, but his impact goes far beyond the athletic fields. Before we meet today's guest, make sure you push the subscription button as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode with another amazing professional here on the Pro Talk podcast. As I mentioned, today's guest, he's in two Hall of Fames. He's been a teacher for over 38 years, and he was a coach for over 52 years. He's got a BS in education, along with a master's in counseling. Most people know him as Rick McKeone, but his tennis buddies and I affectionately call him Ricky Vaughn, two-time HOF. So, Rick McKeone, welcome to the Pro Talk podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. It's been a while in the making, and I've been working on you to get you on here and share your wisdom. So I appreciate your time.
Well, I'm glad to help you out.
Okay. So you taught 38 years. Did you teach in elementary school, high school?
Taught math in high school. Taught
What?
taught a little bit of everything. So it was high school math.
Yeah. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, math was probably my best subject. And then when I went into college trying to figure out what I wanted to major, I talked to one of my math teachers, and he was a football coach, and I asked him, I said, "Why did you choose math?" And he said, "Have you ever written a essay in math?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Okay, that's what I want," because I hated writing essays and all that kind of stuff. So I went the math route.
Nice.
I'm glad I did, because getting a job, they always need math teachers, and they always need coaches. So it helped me get a job.
Well, good. Now you coach football, wrestling, baseball, softball, golf, track and field. I forgot to mention in the intro that not only are you in two Hall of Fames, you've got two children that were both inducted into the Riverwood High School Hall of Fame. Is that correct?
Yes, Zach got in because he was a two-time All-State. He was All-State in track and field and All-State in wrestling, was a wrestling champ. And Lindsay was honorable mention All-State in softball. Yes. Yeah, she started lettering when she was a freshman. She lettered in basketball, but she was on the team. She didn't she was she was never a starter in basketball, but I guess she called her the sixth man to come in, but her sport was softball. And then she played field or lacrosse, and she was a goalie in lacrosse for like 3 seasons, and then decided her senior year that she wanted to go out for track, and threw the shot in the discus and track.
You mentioned there was a category that your oldest son, Rick, he was a tri-sport athlete, and you said there should be some designation for that. Can you explain that?
Okay. All three of my sons, all three of my kids were in 3 sports. They went from a fall sport, winter sport, to a spring sport. And I did the same thing when I was in high school, and I was extremely proud of it that there was 3 of us in my graduating class that were 3-sport lettermen. And I've always pushed that if you want to become a good athlete, don't specialize, but learn to compete in all different levels. And so all 3 of them played three sports. And Rick played football for 3 years, and then came to me his senior year and said, I really want to do well in wrestling this year. And I'm 130 pounds trying to play football against these guys that are weighing 250. I'd like to go out for cross country. You're not mad, are you? And I said, no, that would be great. And so that pushed him and Zach into cross country. And then they went from there. And Rick went cross country his senior year, wrestled, made the state tournament, and then played baseball. and we made the playoffs that year also. And then Zach did the same thing, cross country, wrestling, and then went to track. And Lindsay, again, was the same thing. She went softball, basketball, lacrosse, track.
But you
So,
and your wife, Sue, are kinda busy on the weekends.
but when they were young, yeah, um, it was Zach and Li Zach and Rick were both playing baseball, and I was coaching their baseball teams, so we were running we never had any vacation time, and then when Lindsay got old enough, Lindsay was softball, and softball, basketball, the same thing, and yeah, we were busy. Every weekend, we were doing something.
Nice. So this started probably because you were an athlete growing up. Where did you grow up? What part of the country?
I grew up in Kansas City, uh, went to, O'Hara High School. It was, uh, Catholic high school there in Kansas City. From there, I, went to what is now Missouri State, but was called Southwest Missouri State. Went and wrestled there for 3 years. And then first year out, I coached in a small town down in South Georgia or Missouri, Cassville, Missouri. I coached for 1 year. Then it moved up to Raytown, which is a suburb of Kansas City. Coached there for 5 years, and then from there, I went into St. Louis, coached in what was like the Parkway School District, which would be equivalent to Fulton County, Cobb County, whatever it is, and coached 2 years at what they called Parkway South. And then I guess the next 15 years, something like that, 17 years at Parkway North. So, and then from there, I came down uh, to Riverwood High School down in Fulton County and coached there for 13 years.
Nice. So when you grew up, you played sports. What was your upbringing? What was the first sport you
Played football in the fall, wrestling in the winter, and then I went track and field on my high school team because we didn't have a baseball team, and then I played baseball all during the summer. So, it was just to be honest with you, when kids get up and they're not out for a sport, I go, "What do you do after school?" You know, it was always with me, it was, "Okay, school's over with, classes are over with, I've got practice, I go home, eat, do my homework, and then," and my mom said, "Well, you're just a big nerd. You just, you you don't have anything. You just come home, do your homework, and, you're just, studying and all that kinda stuff." So, from 13 to 17, so she said I used to walk around with one of those little pocket protectors to and stuff, and I said and it was no, I didn't do that, but so
Okay, so growing up as a little kid, how old were you when you started playing sports?
I guess okay, I must have been 7 because I started bugging my parents to get into Little League Baseball, and so and I played in our league and in the league that I happened to be or this at that time, it was everybody played in, like you played in the same division 2 years. So, it was like 7 and 8 and then, 9 and 10 and whatever. So, the first year, I can remember my big accomplishment my first year was that I fouled off a pitch during a game, and that was the only time I ever touched the ball. So, it was and then the next year, I move up, and I stay in that same division, and then all of a sudden, I'm playing all the time, and, I make the all-star team. So, it's like then the next year, I go and I'm sitting and hardly playing, and then the next year, I'm playing almost every day. So, it was that was it. And then, I guess when I got into 6th grade, 7th grade, the elementary school that I was at had a football program. So I started playing football and played football for the parochial school. And then that led into high school. So played football my freshman year. We had no wrestling program my freshman year. So that I'd come home and just screw around, and then went out for track my freshman, or yeah, out for track. Then the sophomore year, they started, football coach came in and said, if you're planning on playing football, then you better be doing something over the winter. So you're either up playing basketball or you're going to go out for wrestling. So wrestling was what I ended up doing. I weighed about 100 pounds at that time. So I mean, I didn't really have much choice. And then once I got into wrestling, then I didn't have to compete against those guys that were, 40, 50 pounds heavier than I was. So that's where I got into wrestling. Then after that, it was just track in the spring, baseball during the summer. And it just, it went that way till I went away to college. So no, no. So
Good thing. Now, at your age or growing up and as a youth athlete, did they have all stars or travel ball, or was it just
okay. There was no travel. Well, no, there was no travel ball. You had different divisions that, that were neighborhood divisions and the area, and then you'd sign up for baseball. You'd have tryouts. Now, tryouts were like they are now, but it was more competitive back then than it is here. It wasn't like, well, you have to keep these kids. It was, if you got picked, you got picked. And I can remember one time that I went to tryouts and my dad was going to help coach another team. And they told me during tryouts, they said, okay, I want you to mess up. Don't, we don't want you to get picked by another team. You need to screw up a little bit and I don't want you trying as hard as you can because we want to pick up some pitchers and stuff, and then we'll pick you up in the second or third round. So it was that kind of thing. And so that was our competitive stuff. And you just played in there, and then we would have, I don't know, 15, 16 games against each other. But you play each other maybe 2 or 3 times. So we had like 8 or 9 teams out in that division. And then they go from there and they'd have an all-star team. So, but there weren't participation trophies. The big trophies were, you had 2 trophies per team. You had an MVP that was supposed to be the best player, and then they had a Hustler Award. And then first place trophy, second place trophy, and that was it. So one of the things I'm really proud of is that I knew I couldn't get the MVP. I wasn't, I was average, but you weren't going to get the Hustler Award away from me. So, uh, that's what I did was I prided myself that I was going to play as hard as I could the whole season. And I mean, I was getting a Hustler Award every year. Excuse me.
well, that was the golden award at the basketball camps that I attended to, the Hustle Award. So I'm proud of you there, and that does not surprise me. Who was your favorite favorite coach, youth coach growing up?
See, that's a funny one. My high school football coach was also my wrestling coach. And, um, man, he was tough. And you you don't realize it when he's coaching you. And man, it was like, man, I hate this guy. He's always on top. He's yelling at us for, whatever. And it was always, he was a pain in the butt. And so as it turns out, my mom happened to see him the year after I graduated. And heck, I didn't even know that my mom knew who he was or even that he knew she was. And they were talking outside of school. and asked how I was doing. She told me that I was going to school, that I was going to get a teaching degree and because I wanted to coach. And one thing that stuck in my mind was that he said, "Well, just tell Rick to be himself and he'll be fine with his coaching and that." Well, then the funny thing was when I went into St. Louis, he was in the same school district and I was coaching against him. So for 2 years, I was an assistant coach and I coached against his high school. The Parkway North was the school he was at. So I coached against him and coached against him wrestling. And again, I was an assistant wrestling for the 2 years there and found out that they needed a wrestling coach. Went to Parkway North as a wrestling coach and was going to be his assistant. And again, he he's brutal. I mean, expects the very best out of everybody. And as far as the coaches go, it was the same thing. He expected you to do your job. And again, once you get away from and start maturing and figuring out what's going on, you figure out he's a hell of a coach and he knows what he's doing, and you start to fall in love with him. And what a great person that he is, how he was always for his players, and what he was asking for you always made you a better person, a better player, better coach. And so I ended up being his assistant in football, and then for 2 years, he was my assistant in wrestling. And so it was like, he just was my mentor, helped me do everything. He was tough, but then once I got out and started coaching, then I started figuring out, you know what? Everything that he was doing was for me and to make me better. And, the funny thing is that you hate him when you're in school, you get out, and then all of a sudden you figure out, how much they really helped you. And then you fall in love with the guy. And now, now he's my fishing buddy. And we go up to Canada once a year and fish for a week. And, now it's still hard for me to call him, by his name. He's still coach to me. And, he's always going to be that guy up above me, somebody that I might always look up to. And I don't know if I'll ever think of him as being a peer. He's always going to be the guy I always look up to. So,
You mentioned before we got cut off that tough coach turned out to be more than just a coach for you.
right, right. Like I said, he was tough. But after you get out of school and you look back at it, you understood what he was doing. And then when I coached along beside him, then the same thing. You can't believe once get out about all the people that come back and how much they care for him and how much how they look him up after they graduate. He's got a couple guys that played pro ball that came back, and and it's people just keep it how much they love him after he's graduated. And so it's just amazing about how many people get up and say, well, man, you really were a tough coach, but I needed that. And so it's just amazing about how he does that. And one of the things that was amazing to me was that the I guess the last 5 or 6 years that I was coaching in St. Louis, coaching football, every one of well, I take that back. All but one of the coaches that were on his staff were ex-players, players that had played for him, uh, came back, got teaching degrees, were teaching, and were on his coaching staff. So to me, that was, you know, that was a good something that he should really have been proud of, and I'm sure he was.
Sure. That's great to hear. Now, what was the school? So I don't want my cake or any Chicago Bears fan getting upset about this, but this was one of your schools, the Vikings. Who were they?
That was Parkway North. That was where I was
Okay.
coaching with him.
Okay. So this is to honor you in there.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
There you go. All right. So Bears fans relax, or Brian Anderson with the Detroit Lions. So I wanted to ask you, you coached in football. What position did you coach in football?
Uh, a little bit of everything. I was a head freshman football coach for a while, moved up to junior varsity, then moved up on the varsity as a defensive coordinator. And there you're you coach a little bit of everything. So I think I was in, because of my guys that were working with me, I took the defensive line because one of the coaches that we had was a linebacker in college. So he took the linebackers. Another one that had played defensive backs, so he worked with the defensive backs. So we had like three coaches that were defensive coaches. Then the other guys were on offense, and then everybody just kind of worked with the special teams. And I really weasel my way in to try to do as much of the special teams as I could. That was everybody felt, we special teams have to be special. We have to win that part of the game. And I guess I just kind of weasel my way into doing a lot of that stuff.
It's a part of the game many people don't consider as being important. They just think
Yeah.
it's just some extra part.
Yeah. And luckily we had some all-state kickers and punters. My last few years there, we had an all-state kicker, all-state punter, two all-state kickers. And so it was, and we spent a lot of time on special teams. So it was, I kind of pride in did a lot with that part of it, the game. In Missouri, okay, in Missouri, they have a fall season, winter season, um, spring season, and usually they do not overlap. And if they do, it's like by a week or so. So we couldn't start wrestling practices until I guess it was the middle of November. And you really didn't start wrestling matches until sometime in December. Then they would be, and about, I guess, end of February is when they were having their state tournaments and stuff. And again, you can't play baseball up there because you know, it, it's still snowing and cold and stuff. So baseball didn't start until, March. So you didn't really overlap. And if we had an overlap, it was, just by, I know, a week or so. But now when you get down here, see, and the other thing was their state tournament, their state football program, the finals were Thanksgiving weekend. So their season's over in November. And so now starting in December, then you go into basketball and wrestling and stuff. So in Missouri, they didn't overlap. And again, they're not as gung ho in football as they are down here. That state tournament, their state, like I said, it was over in November. And down here, you you go what, all the way until middle of December or later. So it took some getting used to with the wrestling program down here because I was coaching football for a while and for the first 3 or 4 years down here. And it would be cutting into the wrestling part of it. So, and a lot of it I had to let my assistant coach take it and then go from there. Excuse me.
That's quite all right. One of your wrestlers, you said your son Zach, I asked him, knowing that you're kind of an intense guy, I said, "What was it like playing wrestling for your dad?" And he said, "When you were at home, When we heard dad throw up in the bathroom, we knew we had to hurry up and get in the car. It was time to go for the wrestling meets. So that's how intense you are as a coach. You and Bill Russell throwing up before the game that you weren't even playing or competing.
Well, yeah, it was, and the funny thing was, um, I don't know what it was. We had a huge football game one time, 2 schools in the same district, Parkway South, Parkway North. We're both undefeated, and whoever wins the game goes to the playoffs. We're 8-0, they're 8-0. So whoever wins the ball game goes to the playoffs. And before the game, I'm over by the goalpost, just dry heaving. And I'm not throwing up, it's just dry heaving. And the funny thing was, wrestling's over with, it's gone. It just, I guess it was just nerves and that and stuff that, that was what happens.
Now, that ever happened for softball? Did you coach your daughter in high
Yes.
school in softball?
Yep. Yep. When coincidence that the softball coach quit, like, in the middle of the summer, and I had already said that I wasn't gonna coach football, and, um, the athletic director came to me and said, "Do you wanna coach softball?" And I said, "Sure." Well, actually, it was 2 years before Lindsay Caton. So, I got into the softball program, and then 2 years later and then we had a good group of girls that came in Lindsay's freshman year and really helped the whole program out, so
And then you also coach golf and track and field. So there wasn't many off seasons that you had time to screw
no, so
around
see,
in
that's
school like you did.
again, I okay, I coached 3 sports for 38 years. Um, I didn't have I can't remember. I may have had 1 or 2 seasons where I didn't 1 year where I didn't coach one sport or something, but I went from football or softball into wrestling, wrestling into baseball or track and field or golf, and again, some of those like golf, you really don't coach golf. It's those kids, they come out, they're the country club kids that know how to play golf and stuff, and it's just you put the lineup together and go from there. So, just that was a fun time because then you send them out to the golf course, go out and play 9. They go out and play the front 9, and you go play the back 9 and maybe skip a couple holes so that you're done before they get there, and then that's it.
So somebody's got to keep the team together and motivate them.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta keep everybody happy.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that struck me is very impressive about you. Your wife sent me an invitation behind your back to the Riverwood Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And that afternoon, you and I were trading off tennis lesson for some baseball field time, and you and I were playing catch. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but you mentioned, well, tonight's the night. I said, what's going on? I acted like I was playing dumb. And you said, I'm getting inducted into the Riverwood Hall of Fame. And we started talking about the different sports you coached. And I asked you this question. This to me is a mark of a great coach. I said, what sport did you like coaching the most? And you said it didn't matter, whatever the season was and whatever we were coaching at the time. So that shows me that your heart and your commitment was always there. And then another thing that I've never told you that was so impressive to me that during that Riverwood ceremony, after talking to you and your family, I'm walking around and talking with different people that knew you and some former players. Every parent and every player said to me, he remembered me. He remembered my name. He asked about my kids. My kids weren't there. He asked how so and so was doing. And every person, they said that you remembered their kid or the parent's name. So that's very impressive about you. That it was a connection. It wasn't just a player; it was a person, and that's probably part of the reason why you're in two different Hall of Fames. When I first met you, I met you on the tennis court, and for a couple weeks, I really didn't get to talk to you because you had this. I guess I'd call it resting game face. And then one night of practice, it rained, and a couple of the guys on the team said, "Let's go up to the street and to the local watering hole." And I remember I was sitting down next to you and you ordered your burger and fries. And that's when I first got to know you. And I thought, man, this guy's amazing. He knows we're talking about baseball. There's a baseball game on. And I really had such a great time talking to you about baseball. So I want to pick your brain about some of the rules in Major League Baseball. What's your feeling about the extra inning, placing a runner on second base to start the 10th inning?
Okay, to me, now see, I coach softball, and softball to me is different than baseball. Softball, you have to be a lot more strategic because with softball, if you've got that big pitcher, you've got one or ball games that are one to nothing, 2-0, or whatever it is, and there's a strategy to it. I like the idea of putting that runner on second base because now there's a strategy there. All right. Do you just let your hitters go or do you bunt that guy to third and then get that run in? And now you've got to play defense. You get that run and then that's it. You go to then it's their up. Now you got to be okay. Now you got to have bunt defenses. You got to do all that. The pitchers have to be, on ball. I like it rather than, you just that grind that you could go 15 innings, 14 innings, and then you're destroying your pitching staff. See, that one I like. There's other ones that, that I don't, but that one I like.
All right, let's talk about one that I think you don't like. What about the pitcher's engagement, trying to pick off the runner? You get two chances, and if you don't, the guy gets to go to second on a third chance.
Okay, I like the ideas of speeding up the game. See, then again, my philosophy is the home runs. I mean, to me, the home runs are just spectators. To get the fans included. Like I liked Whitey ball. Get your base hit, bunt the guy to second, get your base hit, score the run. I would much rather have doubles than home runs. And when I was teaching at DBAT and teaching hitting, that's what I was stressing to my kids. Hey, listen, you don't want the ball in the air. Ball's in the air, what can happen? They catch the ball. You hit a ground ball, what can happen? Well, it takes a bad hop, you got on the base. They also have to catch it, throw to first base. So there's more possibilities of you getting on base. So I'm, going for the line drive hitters. So having two pickoff attempts, then okay, that gives the runner a better chance of stealing. And to me, I love stealing bases. And so that rule, again, speeds it up and also encourages more to have stolen bases. And again, that to me, you get the runner down to second base, you steal third base. And that's what I tell my grandson when he's playing. Now he's playing 11-year-old and 11-year-olds catchers, you can't throw people out at second. And excuse me. And I said, okay, you get your base hit, you steal second, you steal third, you got a triple. So, you don't have to, you can bunt the ball, get on base, turn it into a triple. And so that rule, I kind of like that rule because it helps improves the running game. Same thing. When it first came out, I thought, this, let him, let the pitcher bat. If he gets on base, let him bunt the ball around and stuff like that. But now, and it's got its plus and minuses, I guess. Now pitchers are so specialized and stuff, but now look how many of them are getting hurt because they're pitching so much. And, and that's all they're doing. So I don't know if that's leading to more injuries that way. But again, it's speeding it up. You can't sit there and watch a baseball game for 4 hours because there's so much dead time in between stuff, in between innings. balls and strikes and all that. So the DH, you're getting more athletes on the field and, you're encouraging more. I believe it's helped the game.
What is your feeling about pitchers only? I've heard several high school parents say that their kid's a pitcher only.
That's see it again. That goes back to, I you're an athlete. We had a kid at Riverwood that he played for us, played third base for us, then went to play on his travel ball and he pitched for us also. So he would pitch Monday and play third base on Thursday and Fridays, and then come back and pitch on Monday again. Goes, plays for his travel team, and all he does is pitch. Well, okay, how's that improving him as a hitter for us? So, how many scouts are looking at the kid, and was one of our better hitters. Well, scout never got to see him hit, if on his travel team, and he blew his arm out and had to have Tommy John surgery. So, and luckily, he bounced back where he could play third base for us, but then we lost him as a pitcher because his travel team, okay, we're gonna use you as a pitcher, and that's it. Well, they overused him, and he blew out his arm. So, it's the same thing. You're an athlete. Do as much as you can. Play bat, play a position, because you never know what's gonna happen. Another funny story was we had a kid that played center field for us, and he pitched a little bit on his travel team, but he was a heck of an outfielder. I mean, and so his senior year, our baseball coach got up and said, "Okay, well, we're gonna have to pitch him more." And I argued, "You can't take him out of center field. He saves us 3 or 4 runs a game by just the catches and stuff that he's making and the throws that he's doing, keeping runners out of scoring position." I said, "We can't pitch him, can't pitch him." And like an idiot, I'm saying, "We can't do that." Well, the head coach knows more than I do. He pitches him. He goes down to, I think, Carolina, Atlanta or something, pitches in college, goes down in college and pitches against Florida, strikes out 11, gets drafted by Milwaukee, moves up to Milwaukee and plays 4 or 5 years for Milwaukee, was traded to Boston and stuff. So, here I am saying, we can't pitch the kid. We need to keep him in the outfield. And in college, that's what they did. They pitched him like one game, then put him out in right field. And so you never know where a kid's going to end up. So you need him to play as much as you can.
Yeah. Kurt Schilling talks about two words that drive him crazy: velo, which is velocity in pitching, and then launch angle. What are your feelings about the over talk about pitcher's velocity and launch angle for hitters?
See, again, Greg Maddux to me was the best pitcher. Now, how hard did he throw? But then again, what did he do? He did location and stuff and set his hitters up. To me, the velocity. Now, again, maybe this is how stupid I am. Who are the kids getting drafted? If they're not throwing 90 miles an hour in high school, they don't even get looked at. That's what everybody, the kid's got to throw 100 miles an hour or, we don't even look at him. We had a kid that threw low 90s, but couldn't throw a strike. So he hardly pitched for us. Well, went to a college camp, and the college camp saw how fast he threw. And so they got up and they recruited him to come play for him. Well, once he got there, couldn't throw a strike. Well, what good does that do? Launch angle. I heard Donaldson one time when he was, MVP and stuff, and he was talking on like MLB or something like that. And he was talking about, you need to start teaching the kids when they're 11 and 12 about launch angle. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? Putting a kid at launch angle? I said, all you're doing is taking a kid that weighs 90 pounds and, he hits the ball 180. Well, the fence is at 200. So what happens? Well, it's an outfield out. And, and I would tell some of the kids the same thing. I said, you've got 180 power. You know what that means? And no, I said, well, you hit the ball 180 feet, but the fence is 200. Where's the outfield play? Well, 180. I said, okay, so what happens? Well, they catch my ball. Okay, well, let's start leveling it out and hit the ball 120 and skip it between the two outfielders and get a double out of it and see what you got.
Yeah.
The launch angle and this stuff, I guess the pros that's what they're recruiting and stuff, but I don't know. I don't think you can teach that to those young kids.
They're only looking at people throwing 90 plus at a young age. And then we're wondering why at the same time, 3 years later in the pros that their arms are dead or Tommy John because they threw too much. Maybe maybe they need to throw more off speed stuff. I don't know. That's a great assessment by you. You mentioned hitting the ball on the ground. When I was at the Pirates fantasy camp, Bill Mazeroski was one of my coaches. And I had fouled off a ball, nice line drive, and I pulled it. And then my next one was a ground ball through the middle, and I got on first base. And I said to Maz, I said, I'm hitting too many balls on the ground. And then he said, what's the matter with that? And I thought, well, okay, here's a home run. A guy's known for a home run. He's telling me, like you said, put the ball on the ground, good things can happen. So there's part of your wisdom. So, all right, I've got to get to a point where friends of ours want to know about fandom. What are the rules? You lived in St. Louis how long before you came to Atlanta?
20, it was what, 80 to 20? 80 to 2000. Yeah, for 20 years.
Okay. Okay. And you were a St. Louis Cardinal fan at the time.
Yeah. Well, okay, now I also lived in Kansas City. So when I was in Kansas City, and that was when the Royals were good. George Brett, uh, you know, they were making the playoffs and then getting beat by the Yankees, but that was the George Brett era. And yeah, so I was a Kansas City fan then, moved to St. Louis. It took a couple years, but then again, it was like, okay, if I'm going to follow a team, why follow the Kansas City if I'm sitting in St. Louis and they've got a good team? You support where you're at. It's to me. Right. And it's more support the local than, well, now they're good, so I'm going to support them. Well, they had those lean years, about 8 or 9 years ago when it was, they weren't playing well, didn't have a lot of talent in between 95 and then when they started this run. So it was, you support the team where you're at. I'm not going to games in Kansas City. I'm not going to games in St. Louis. So yeah, I'm supporting the Braves. The thing is, and my family, they're all St. Louis, and so I've gotten up and said, okay, listen, name 5 players on the Cardinals right now. And they'll go, well, it's Ozzie Smith, and I go, wait a minute, I want somebody that's playing right now. And I can't name them because, a couple of them I could, but they're Goldsmith and Arredondo. Well, they're gone. So, so why are you supporting somebody that you don't even know what the players are? I said, you know more Atlanta players than the Cardinals, and my grandsons, it's the same way. Well, how come you're supporting the Cardinals? Well, because my dad does. Okay. But you've grown up in the Atlanta area. You should be supporting the Braves and stuff. So it's more of that.
It's okay. I accept that. Mr. Our buddy Pork Chop's going to be going, "Atta boy, Rick."
Yeah.
Some people will argue loyalty that you love the jersey and you love the logo and that becomes a part of you. Ever since I was a little kid, I've liked the logo. And So I see both sides. I want to get a two-time Hall of Famer's official take on record. So I do like that. I don't subscribe to it personally, but I do. You support the local.
Well, okay, it's the same thing. Okay, I support the players that were in in the Royals when I was there. Okay, the same thing for the Cardinals. Now, once you get like Ozzie Smith and Ray Langford and all the guys, you know, those were the people that I was rooting for. Well, okay, now who am I rooting for? I'm rooting for the Braves that that I
You hear about
know.
them because it's
Right,
right here in the
right.
backyard, right?
And so you
Yeah.
you root for the people. It's not necessarily the team, and I can understand, well, I'm always going to be a Cardinal fan. I'm always going to be this, but everything changes. And the administration changes and stuff. See, the Falcons as an example. I like what's going on with the Falcons right now. I think that they're starting to, figure out, well, wait a minute, we've got to get the right coach, you know, and they're starting to get some draft choices that are starting to make a difference. Uh, so, it's not necessarily, you know, um, again, it's the players and then where you're at. Now, my whole family's all Chiefs fans. Well, because they're from Kansas. Again, my family was from Kansas City. I was raised in Kansas City. Uh, I was there. I was in Kansas City when they won the Super Bowl the first time. So, that I liked it, but then it's a different administration, different players and stuff. But again, it's where you're living and the people that you get to know. So the players.
Just kidding you. All right. What was your favorite sport to play as a kid or an adult? If you could
Same
only play
answer
one sport.
same answers that I gave about coaching. It was whatever sport that I was in. I mean, I couldn't when I was playing football, I was playing football. During wrestling season, it was wrestling. And track and field, it was the same way. It was like whatever sport that I happened to be in was what I was enjoying. You know, I mean, that was just, I didn't have any favorite. It was, you know, and I wasn't good in any one of them. It wasn't like I was a standout wrestler, I was a standout football player or anything. I think I was just, I mean, average football player, average wrestler. Uh, I was fast, but not the fastest guy on the team. So, I was a decent baseball player, but nothing special. So it was just
Well, I've
whatever
seen
I
you
was
compete.
doing.
I've seen you compete. I'll take your heart and your grit. I'll take you as a teammate any day. Who's your all-time favorite sports team?
Sports team,
Favorite team?
I guess it was the '82 Cardinals when the, they that's when they were, Vince Coleman, they were running the bases and stuff. Ozzy, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess that and probably the Royals with the George Brett and them, George Brett and some of the players, Frank White and all the you know Amos Otis and all this kind of. So, hmm, that see that would be that's a okay. I'd have to go by sports. I like Pete Rose in baseball. Again, Charlie Hustle. He didn't, he wasn't a home run hitter. He would take the base and being competitive. Wrestling, probably been Dan Gable. And again, it was just again, I always he was my type of wrestler. Football, I don't know. I didn't have really a football favorite as much as, the baseball and stuff like that. And it also goes, I guess, like by eras. Now I like Albies, second baseman for the Braves. He to me plays the game the right way and is always hustling and has a good time doing it. And I've seen him chew. I can remember one time, won a ball game or something. He was on second with the third base on a throw or something, and the guy at first base didn't advance. And they showed a camera on him, and Albies was yelling across the diamond at this guy, and he was ticked off because the guy hadn't advanced. And to me, I think he's one of the leaders on the team. And I'm just afraid that they're going to do something stupid and end up trying to trade him and stuff like they did Freeman. And to me, that sometimes the economics to me doesn't make sense. And so that's the one thing about baseball that I wish more teams did, was stopped on the economic and think more about, hey, you know what? This guy, you know, we need to keep him around no matter what the price, because he's the
Hard
heart
to
of
put
the
a
team.
price on character. Yeah, yeah. So are you saying Spike Rimby then is your favorite all-time tennis player?
Yeah, yeah. Anybody that dives after the ball and stuff. But I don't think he's doing it much anymore, is he?
I don't know. Maybe every now and then when he doesn't mean to fall. Uh, all right. What is the best World Series ever?
Gosh, you know, I guess it was the '82 Cardinals when they beat Milwaukee, because I was there. And as a matter of fact, I was down. I think it was, yeah, it was my brother happened to be in town, and we were down in that area when they won. They ended up winning the ball game and stuff. And again, they won. It was all pitching and base running and base hits and close ball games and stuff. It was just grinded out baseball. And to me, I like watching that rather than, it's fun to go watch them hit the 3-run home run and stuff. But, and when I go, I don't watch a whole lot of baseball or sports in general because I do too much analyzing. I'll sit there and go, okay, there's a guy on first. Are they going to, what's the defense doing? Are they going to try to advance this guy? You know, hey, you know what? I would bunt in this situation or what it is. And then I analyze too much, and I don't sit back as a fan and so enjoy watching it and stuff like that. So, and then I get all upset when things aren't going the way I think they should go.
Yeah. There's something beautiful though that baseball is so great about what could happen. The difference between on a 1-1 count, if it's a ball, advantage goes to the hitter. If it's a strike, that 1-2 count, advantage to the pitcher. And the general public just gets caught up in the home run. Look at all that action. But you are sitting there as a baseball mind thinking about what pitch he should throw because of the last pitch that was successful or wasn't successful. So I understand that the pitcher's duel is kind of fun and there's suspense there that people don't always see.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. I like sitting there analyzing the stuff. I like doing it in football, but I don't watch a lot of it because it's like, man, that was, why are they calling that play? Or I get upset because the coaches, why are they burning up the clock so much? use, do this, do that, whatever it is. And then, everybody around me goes, what are you talking about? What's this? And it's like, they just wasted 23 seconds when they could have spiked the ball or done whatever it is. So, um, it's, and then I also like watching, when I do watch the plays that they make, the different, again, it's not, everybody watches the catches and the plays and stuff. And I'm looking at, man, that was a pick play. This guy ran that route. They opened up this one because of the way that other receiver went. Sometimes it's just hard to sit there and try to analyze and stuff like that.
All right, I have two more questions for you before you go get your ball machine out. What's your all-time favorite book, sports or otherwise?
Favorite book? What? Let me think. The last real book that I read it was about Georgia football. It was like the history of Georgia football, and I enjoyed that because it was like, talking about the different eras and stuff like that. And it was before they won the national championship. So it was like the Herschel Walker and all that kind of stuff. History books like that. I used to get like the sports almanac and go through and look at all the different records and stuff, who had the most home runs, who had, the most baskets in basketball, who had the longest winning streak in college and all that kind of stuff. But those almanacs and stuff like that, I used to really enjoy reading those.
Yeah. Remember that magazine Sport?
Say that again?
The magazine Sport. It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
sport.
Sports
They used to have,
Illustrated.
well, it wasn't Sports Illustrated, it was just called
Sport,
Sport.
yeah.
Yeah, and they had more, individual features, but they would have a year-end thing, and it was like their year-end almanac, and like you said, I'd sit there and look at it, it's like so many crazy facts. It was always a fun
Yeah,
year-end
yeah.
episode. Yeah,
I used to get Sport magazine.
yeah.
I must have 5 boxes down in the basement of Sports Illustrated. I never threw 'em any of them away. I bet if I got online at eBay or something, I bet that there's like, I could sell certain issues and stuff. Sports Illustrated, I used to read all the time. And they had that, it was probably the Sport where they had that end of the year, this is everything that happened this year, that
Right,
I enjoyed reading that kind of stuff.
yeah, right. Alright, last question. What makes a great athlete?
To me, it's determination. You don't have to have a lot of skill. What you have to have is you have to have a lot of determination. You have to have drive, that when things don't go the way that you want them to go, because that's gonna happen more often than the things going right. You have to be determined that when you lose, you gotta learn from it, and then figure out what will make you better the next time. Uh, I used to, and that you can ask Zach about this, and Rick, and Lindsay too. I used to pride myself that I coached harder the day after a loss than I did the day after a win. I know if you ask Zach and Rick, if we didn't wrestle real well one night, that next day at practice, boy, you'd you better had your socks on straight, because it was we were going after it. It was gonna be a tougher practice. You have to have that determination that, okay, uh, I learned more from losing than from winning. Uh, to me, learning or losing is a great motivator, and that again comes from the determination. Uh, when you learn and when you lose, you have to learn, okay, wait a minute. What did I do wrong? That makes me fight this that much harder to get what I need. So, I mean, I hate losing. And I know after I lose, I may be out the next day hitting tennis balls, or I may be doing a little bit better coaching. Excuse me. But, it's that determination that I always used to say, hey, the harder you work, good things are going to come out of it. It's that if you're willing to work hard and come to a goal, then good things are going to happen. May not be wins and losses, wins, but you're going to know, okay, wait a minute, I lost, but I gave it my best effort.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate your time, man. I know that you're busy. Few notes wrapping up, few great takeaways from Rick McKeone, two-time Hall of Famer. He said, become a great athlete by competing on all levels. So play as many different sports as you can. Be careful about all this select travel ball for 10 months a year. He's a Hustle Award winner. That doesn't surprise me after seeing you compete, but that's impressive, and the pride you take in earning the Hustle Award. And you want to be yourself as a coach. And tough coach can make the player better. A lot of times in today's society, we care about the player's self esteem, and we're afraid to be a little tough on them. But it does make a tough player a better player. And I remember you saying that I needed that tough coach. Qualities to become a great athlete: determination, drive. I love what you just said about learn from losing, and that we learn more from losing than winning. Again, two-time Hall of Famer Rick McKeone, thanks so much for your time, Ricky Vaughn.
I appreciate it. I'm glad I did it. And I'm really glad.
Well, I'm glad you joined us, and got a lot of good nuggets here. It's going to be fun to go back and edit it. So, for everyone out there watching this, if you like this episode, go back, find some more good episodes, send them to some friends. So, till next time, make the most of your time, and always hang tough.
Thanks, Rob.